For the last part of this week's lecture, I'd like you to take a look at this image and really connect it all. And I'll explain that a little bit. This image is from the author of the text that I've been using. I had the pleasure of meeting him as he was advertising his book at a conference this past fall, and he sent me this image that isn't published yet. So I feel, or just published, I can't remember, but I feel pretty privileged to be able to use this, especially for those of us that are more visual learners. While I am not technologically advanced or mechanically inclined at all, this speaks to me in that these 6 separate parts of special education, really the pillars of the gears of special education, cannot work alone. One cannot work without the other, especially when you take a look at the whole system and then begin to understand its pieces and parts. Our text for this week, chapter 1, talked quite a bit about the IEP, and we're going to jump into the intricacies of that in a later week, and probably one of our Zoom sessions will be dedicated to that also. But for right now, I'd like you to take a look at how those other statutory and regulatory laws are really integral to this system. You can't do one without the other. If you look at FAPE, the fact that every student needs to have access to a free and appropriate public education, that's at the very center. And there are 2 terms there that we didn't talk about. On the top of the gear for FAPE, it says procedural requirements. And in the bottom, it says substantive requirements. That simply means the blue on the top, procedures, are compliance, following the steps, the forms of the IEP, the real statutory regulatory parts of special education. Checking the boxes, crossing your T's, dotting your I's, making sure that we have a framework for all students. The bottom part of that is the substantive part. What we've written in the IEP, is it appropriate? Is it challenging? Does it set high expectations? Is what's written in the IEP being carried out? The substance, the meat of it. Then we've got least restrictive environment. Have we considered that student belongs with their non-disabled peers? Have we tried what we need to try to make sure that student is with their non-disabled peers? And can we provide those services in a less restrictive environment? If they're in a more restrictive environment, do we have the documentation and the evidence to back that up? Family participation. I'm hoping you enjoyed the resources I gave you this week. We are, just like IEP, we are going to dig deeper into that in a future week. Procedural safeguards can be a scary place to be. On one hand, schools need to make sure they're providing information that parents can understand, making sure parents have access to records, to meetings, and making sure parents have meaningful participation. That can go wrong, and if it does go wrong, there are several steps that you can take. Some less scary than others, but it can go all the way to a state complaint and to the court. And last, but more kind of at the beginning, we need to make sure that all students have had and continue to have non-discriminatory evaluation to make sure that their diagnosis and their eligibility remains the center of how they receive services and how we identify students and how we make sure we're helping all students learn. Save some space for some more learning about the IEP and about family participation, but I'm hoping that you've had a chance to really dig in deep with both our chapter and this lecture series, and this visual helps you to make some connections.